After years of leftist leadership in Bolivia, a new president from the center-right. Things could change fast.
He has said that he has over 200 executive decrees prepared for the first week.
I'm Marco Werman.
And I'm Carolyn Beeler. Also, the growth of foreign agent laws used to suppress dissent.
These laws are actually emerging all over the world.
And tourists visiting Antarctica follow the rules to protect the environment.
You can't sit on the snow, you can't kneel on the snow, you can't put your backpack on the snow.
Those rules still might not be enough.
And it is a tradition during Diwali with positive associations.
Connection, happiness, a lot of nostalgia, and I would say very good vibes.
He's talking about gambling.
We'll hear why today on The World.
This is The World. I'm Carolyn Beeler.
And I'm Marco Werman. Great to have you with us on this Monday.
Bolivia has been led by leftist leaders for 20 years. Election after election, voters went to the polls and reaffirmed the political direction they wanted for their country. But this weekend, the people made clear they want a new path.
The winner of yesterday's presidential elections in Bolivia, Rodrigo Paz, is a right-leaning centrist. He won the runoff with 54% of the vote.
This is a significant shift in Bolivia's political evolution, and it tracks with changes in other Latin American countries. We asked Catherine Lederber with the Andean Information Network in Washington, D.C., to explain what looks like a turning point.
Rodrigo Paz ran on a platform of economic change, of what he perceives as dramatic reform, reduction of the Bolivian state, reduction of the workforce, and also, credit and a stimulation on the economy. At the same time, through his right-wing populist candidate, he was able to capture a great deal of the grassroots vote of people in rural areas who were disenchanted with the process and had no one specifically to vote for because no leftist candidate made it to the second round.
The right-wing populist candidate was his running mate?
His running mate, former police captain Edmund Lara.
So I understand, even though this is a shift from a leftist party that has been in power for almost 2 decades, it is a more moderate shift than the other candidate would have been.
It's a more moderate shift than the other candidate. The other candidate planned very much a pro-Trump line and very much part of that international right coalition.
I want to get a bit more to the international coalition you're talking about in a second, but let's stick with Bolivia for a bit longer. The left wing has been in power there for nearly 2 decades, as I've said, specifically the Movement Towards Socialism Party, or MAS. Why was it able to maintain popularity and power for so long? And then what do we think has changed at this point?
So in the first 3 terms of Evo Morales from 2005 to 2019, you saw economic growth. You had a dramatic decrease in extreme poverty. You saw a significant increase in international reserves as they were able to take advantage of income from national gas and reinvest that in education, indigenous peoples, infrastructures, and also social programs. This 20-year period was interrupted by a coup in 2019, a coup that was set off by a controversial 4th-term run for President Morales. But at the same time, after Morales promised that he would withdraw from the elections, we saw a great deal of violence, a great deal of corruption. And so that started to deteriorate the economy and the rule of law. And then the successor, Luis Arce, who was democratically elected as the MAS candidate, Morales' surrogate, has behaved very poorly. He has not been able to fund state activities, and you see that international reserves have disappeared.
International reserves of currency.
International currency reserves, but also Bolivia's gold supply. And at the same time, you see salaries not being paid for months. You see basically the Bolivian state falling apart.
So you've just described the significant shortcomings of the previous administration under MAS. Do you see this win by Rodrigo Paz and his Christian Democratic Party as a turning point then, and not a blip?
Well, this is definitely a shift. We have the left fractured into at least three pieces. You have internal divisions. It depends very much on what happens in the first days of his government. He has said that he has over 200 executive decrees prepared for the first week. In my experience, a flurry of executive decrees quickly can cause a great deal of unrest and a great deal of upheaval.
You mentioned his first days in office. What kind of changes on the ground do you expect as a result of this election outcome?
They're talking about removing the gasoline and diesel subsidies. These are subsidies that are almost 90%. They are draining the treasury, but removing from one moment to the next such significant subsidies would mean that prices in Bolivia for everything would quintuple or even worse. It would really crush the Bolivian working class and indigenous people. And if that comes very early in the government, I think we're going to see a separation of his grassroots supporter. We're going to see a push further to the right by his traditional right-wing party allies. And I think we're going to see a push from Washington with a very vocal Trump administration in Latin America.
This turn from the left to right, as we've mentioned, is not unique to Bolivia. It's something we're seeing across several Latin American countries. Is there a unifying reason why?
Well, I think one of the unifying reasons is U.S. intervention or U.S. pressure. Remember that the Colombian elections are coming up in the first part of 2026. And you see right now Donald Trump's tweet last night about removing funding from the Colombians, that they're focusing on drug trafficking. You have a great deal of funding, from CPAC going through the continent. The Trump administration's announced support for a bailout for Argentina's far-right Milei is another example. The Trump administration's funding or gift of military equipment, including fighter planes, are also incentives. So it looks to me that we are in a very delicate position in the region as a result of, pressure, direct U.S. action, and a kind of struggling on the part of leftist governments to maintain their hold, while the right is campaigning very well-funded campaigns on the right. And I think we're going to see the continent shift to the right pretty dramatically.
Those external pressures from the U.S., do you think they are more important than internal political factors in this driving this shift rightward?
They should not be. But they may end up being decisive in this case, especially for countries that are extremely vulnerable because they're reliant on U.S. economic assistance. I mean, that's not the case for Bolivia now, but the moment that they enter into a dependent relationship, all of that funding is always conditioned. The U.S. conditions anti-drug aid on anti-narcotics performance unilaterally defined by the U.S., and there have always been mechanisms in place, but with this administration, the response is much more dramatic. It is much more overt, and that's a concern in this region.
Catherine Ledebur is the director of the Andean Information Network, speaking to us about the election of Rodrigo Paz as the next president of Bolivia.
A quick update on events in Gaza and Israel. 2 members of the Trump White House arrived in Israel today in hopes of maintaining the 20-point ceasefire plan that started to unravel over the weekend. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and President Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner met with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
Over the weekend, 2 Israeli soldiers were killed. Israel responded by launching strikes in Gaza and threatening to stop aid from entering the territory. By late yesterday, Israel said it had resumed the ceasefire. The health ministry in Gaza says a total of 80 people have been killed since the ceasefire started.
A little more than a week into the ceasefire, Israel is also waiting for Hamas to turn over the bodies of 16 deceased hostages in keeping with the terms of the agreement. It's not clear whether the flow of aid into Gaza restarted as planned today or not.
Follow more news from the Middle East on our website, theworld.org.
Hindus across the globe are celebrating Diwali today. It's best known as the Festival of Lights, hence popular traditions like illuminating oil lamps and setting off fireworks. But there's a lesser-known tradition that reporter Sushmita Pathak went to check out for us at a Diwali party in New York City over the weekend.
Women in saris and men in kurtas are swaying to mellow Bollywood music. The drinks are flowing and people are piling their plates with biryani and coconut cake. But in a corner of the room, one group is partaking in something else.
One more round and actual money then. Oh no, we're getting recorded. No money.
No money, only.
What is money?
Only coin.
They're gambling. A game of Teen Patti is underway. It's a popular Indian card game similar to poker, but simpler and more luck-based.
So the next round will be 4 cards instead of 3, and you play for best of 3.
Pujita Suri, who's explaining the rules, is something of a champ at this table. Her family plays Teen Patti every Diwali, but they didn't let her participate till she was 18, so she just watched.
But I was very curious and interested, and after that I started playing. This is Diwali for us. Teen Patti and food and card game.
She's not alone in loving the family bonding. For many Indians, Diwali is incomplete without a night of social gambling. That may seem surprising. Vidhi Modi gets questions about it all the time from her non-Indian friends. She sells Diwali fireworks in Jersey City.
I think it comes to them as a shock. It's if you're celebrating, why are you gambling?
Diwali is a 5-day festival marking the victory of good over evil. It's a celebration of light and all things good. But it's also about prosperity. On the first day, called Dhanteras, people pray for good health and prosperity. Jewelry sales skyrocket.
That one day is to spend money, is to buy gold, silver, in hopes of you getting more money. That's the day you're spending money, and that's the day you're also gambling your money away.
The custom can be traced back to Hindu mythology. The story goes that the goddess Parvati played dice with her husband Lord Shiva during Diwali and declared that whoever gambled at this time would enjoy good luck and wealth in the year ahead. In fact, some believe that if you don't gamble on Diwali, you could be born a donkey in your next birth. And it makes for an amazing bonding activity, says Harshdeep Mangat, who also grew up playing Teen Patti.
You often spend 4 or 5 hours in the middle of the night just playing cards and just laughing, having the time of your life with your little cousins and your family.
It's a striking contrast to how gambling is usually seen in India as a vice, says Mangat. He studies video game and online gambling addiction at the University of Gibraltar.
Over the recent years, a lot of the online gambling applications that had been surfacing in India, a lot of these apps were trying to tap into the Diwali spirit. They were trying to tap into the people who might not be hanging out with their friends and playing cards, tap into those people and encouraging them to gamble. And I think with online gambling, the possibility of ceaseless consumption arises.
India has seen a surge in online gambling in recent years. It's destroyed millions of families. It's become such a serious problem that in August, the Indian government banned all real money online gaming. But Diwali gambling is generally friendly and has low stakes, says Mangat. And so, just during Diwali, gambling takes on a positive meaning, especially for those away from home.
I think at this point, being abroad for the last 6 years, it signifies just connection, happiness, a lot of nostalgia, and I would say very good vibes.
That's certainly the mood at the Diwali party in New York City. As the night progresses, the Bollywood beats rise in tempo and the Teen Patti card game heats up. My bets are on the Teen Patti maven Suri.
I got killer cards too. I got this.
For the world, I'm Sushmita Pathak in New York City.
It took about 10 minutes. I'm talking about that heist at the Louvre. That story is ahead. You are listening to The World. This is The World. I'm Carolyn Beeler. Let's talk about what happened over the weekend at the Louvre in Paris. Thieves broke into the iconic museum and made off with some of France's crown jewels, tiaras and brooches dating back to the era of Napoleon. The burglary was brazen. It is also part of a growing trend. The World's Jerry Haddon reports.
The theft at the Louvre is embarrassing for the priceless value of what was taken and because of how the thieves broke in. through a normal, unprotected glass window. From the banks of the River Seine, TV crews film away as forensics experts search for clues at said smashed window. Clues as to who did this and how. This is the work of organized crime, said France's culture minister Rachida Dati, who'd rushed to the scene of the break-in yesterday. That pros were involved goes without saying, says art detective Arthur Brand.
It shows, they went in 4 minutes, they came out with the French crown jewels.
Brand is a renowned investigator who's helped recover over 200 works of art. In the case of jewels, he says, investigators have just a tiny window of time to recover them. Because like a stolen car in a chop shop, chances are a tiara, even one that once graced the neck of an empress, will get stripped for its parts.
Many museums in France, Germany, England, even the Netherlands, are being targeted by certain groups who especially are after gold, silver, and diamonds. They have people who know how to melt down precious metals, to dismantle diamonds.
If that happens, the original piece and the evidence of a crime are destroyed. So gangs have been targeting museums in recent years. The payoff can be huge. One of the tiaras taken from the Louvre, for example, is encrusted with over 1,000 emeralds and diamonds, each virtually untraceable on its own. Losing these jewels is causing anguish in France, where museum staff have long complained that security measures are too lax. Truth is, though, no museum can be made 100% secure, says Brand.
Many of these museums are housed in older buildings or in very large buildings, and you don't want to turn it into a Fort Knox. It should be available for the public. The only thing the museums can do is to slow them down.
Slow thieves down so that the police can get there and catch them. If the Louvre can pull that off, it would begin to reverse more than a century of high-profile burglaries, beginning in 1911, when a former employee waltzed in and stole the Mona Lisa.
Luckily, the Mona Lisa was recovered, and partly because of that theft, it's now the most famous painting in the world.
Given the choice between priceless paintings and priceless jewels, Brand says, thieves will tend to choose the jewels these days, because famous paintings are much harder to hide and can't be sold for parts. For The World, I'm Jerry Haddon.
Laws targeting so-called foreign agents have existed in countries around the world for decades. In fact, go back to the 1930s, and you'll find the U.S. enacting the Foreign Agents Registration Act to counter Nazi propaganda. Today, critics of these kinds of laws say they're being distorted, and instead of countering foreign interference, they're suppressing internal groups that provide services and information the governments find objectionable, targeting the works of journalists, academics, and NGOs in particular. Civicus is an international watchdog group that's just published a new report on the use of foreign agent laws. Mandeep Tiwana was the lead author on the report. When we spoke today, he told me that foreign agent laws are now emerging all over the world.
Authoritarian leaders are learning from each other. They are actually following the blueprint that was put together by Russia. And there's a lot of coordination that's happening between authoritarian governments that are ruled by a corrupt cabal right at the top. So they're learning from each other. They're sharing bad practices, as we can call them, so that they can rule for a long time.
Can you give us a few examples of the coordination you're talking about?
Many of these leaders will refer to each other in their work. They borrow legislation from each other. They also replicate their tactics. They use derogatory language against human rights and social justice activists. They call them agents of foreign governments. They call them as inimical to national values. They call them as trying to undermine cultural constructs. So first they start to vilify and stigmatize those who speak out against them, and especially nonprofits. Then they slowly start to introduce all sorts of laws that will reduce the independence of civil society organizations. And then the foreign agents laws are there so that these organizations cannot get international funding because they find it much easier to control national sources of funding. And in more extreme cases, they also put false cases against activists and unfair trials. And in some cases, they even use their agents, whether in uniform or out of it, to physically attack those who uncover their wrongdoings.
So that's kind of how these laws have been distorted. If we go back to 2012, the foreign agent law enacted in Russia, recalling Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, very critical of it, and NGOs suddenly had to register with the government. How did Russia introduce that law more than a decade ago, though? What was its stated intent and originally meant to accomplish?
The stated intent was, of course, to prevent foreign influences from coming in to interfere with the governance of the country. But the real intent was far more insidious. Basically, it was to prevent civil society organizations from speaking out against those in power. So they had managed to intimidate many of the domestic supporters of nonprofits in Russia, and delegitimize them in the eyes of the public on whose behalf they were working.
And Mandeep, are there any groups or individuals who have successfully fought back against this type of foreign agent legislation?
Yes, for instance, in Ethiopia, which came out with a law in 2009, that law was repealed, but these legislation keep coming back in different kinds of forms and so on. So at this moment, we are seeing more of these laws proliferating. The fight back will happen, when there is more transparent governance. And unfortunately, we are on a trajectory where we are seeing more and more authoritarianism and populism around the world. In fact, our research at Civica shows almost 70% of the world's population live in places where the core civil society freedoms of peaceful assembly, association, and expression are being severely repressed. So we really have to, to go back to basics and really focus on civic freedoms and civic participation.
Mandeep, we have seen adversarial countries attempt to disrupt elections. We can imagine why a government would want to know if foreign organizations are operating on their soil. So is there a version of these laws that does make sense?
Those who are disrupting the elections can be proceeded against through anti-terror legislation that exists on the books, through foreign money laundering legislation that exists on the books. So adding these laws by putting an additional layer of scrutiny on civil society organizations seems counterproductive to actually a country's constitutional aims. The aim in the large majority of cases is actually to prevent scrutiny of the administration that's in power. It is to silence criticism of the government's work, especially with regards to accountability of power holders.
That was Mandeep Tiwana, head of the nonprofit group Civicus, speaking with us about the expanding use of foreign agent laws across the globe.
This is The World. When it comes to rare earth minerals, China is not the only game in town. Australia is also a key source of the materials we need to make cell phones and electric cars run. Today, the U.S. and Australia signed a deal worth $8.5 billion to strengthen the supply chain to fill the U.S. need for rare earths.
Prime Minister Anthony Albanese met President Trump in the White House today, saying the deal they made takes the U.S.-Australia relationship to the next level. As for China, it recently put restrictions on where it would export its rare earths, as well as technology that includes rare earths. President Trump says he'll meet with Chinese leader Xi Jinping to work out another deal.
In Lebanon, cancer rates have been climbing faster than anywhere else on Earth. Not just cases, but also cancer deaths. That's according to a new study published in the medical journal The Lancet. One reason the rates are so high has to do with how the country supplies power for houses, factories, and businesses. The World's Shirin Jafari explains.
Walk anywhere in Beirut and you're likely to be met with this sound. The non-stop hum of giant generators powering the city. In the past 3 decades, a combination of wars and economic and political crises have destroyed Lebanon's power grid, which has led to the country being reliant on generators.
Supermarkets, dentists, companies, houses, butcheries, they need a replacement for the power. This is what we supply.
I met Michael in Beirut back in 2021. He owns and operates a private generator business in the south of the city. He only gave me his first name because he said he didn't want to draw negative attention to his business.
Do you want to watch a horror movie?
Watch a horror movie.
Come and walk with me.
He walked me inside a parking garage under a multiple-story apartment building. It's pitch dark, and the loud sound of the generator makes it hard to hear him. As we get closer to the machine, it becomes hard to breathe. The smell of the fumes is overwhelming. This is what ends up in the air and in the lungs of the residents of Beirut, leading to all sorts of health problems, experts say.
Soot that is emitted from diesel generators is known or has been proven and shown to have a causal effect with a lot of diseases, including cancer, cardiovascular problems, asthma, and diabetes, and others.
Najat Saliba is a member of the parliament and an atmospheric chemist teaching at the American University of Beirut. She has measured the amount of carcinogenic chemicals emitted by diesel generators in Lebanon since 2010. And she has repeated her research 6 times over the past 15 years.
And every time we measured it, it was high, above what EU recommend, and it was continuously increasing.
The results are devastating, she says, to the point that she thinks they warrant a declaration of a state of emergency by the government. Residents of Beirut only get about 4 to 5 hours of electricity from the grid. For the rest, they rely on generators.
We have no choice. Either we live in a complete darkness or we live with carcinogens sipping through our homes, our bedrooms, and our kitchen.
Saliba became a member of the parliament 3 years ago. Since then, she says she's been pushing for more government regulations.
We managed to renew a decree that was issued in 2011, and this decree forces the diesel generators to actually adhere to certain standards, including putting cyclone filters.
Those filters capture some of the particles and help reduce the amount released into the air. The government also set fines for those who don't follow the regulations, Saliba says. But there's a lot more to be done, says Ali Moqtad. He was involved in the Lancet research that was published earlier this month.
No Lebanese person will debate with you that cancer is increasing in the country. It has been increasing at an alarming rate in Lebanon.
He says the top types of cancer in Lebanon are lung, colon, and prostate. For him, this research is personal.
From my mom's village, I have people who I grew up with, younger than me, their kids have cancer. My brother died, my uncle, in my immediate family, lots of people have died from cancer.
Moqtad says there are other culprits besides the generators. Too many people smoke cigarettes and hookah. There's also environmental pollution from past wars, pesticides used in agriculture, and the Lebanese general lack of awareness about the importance of getting frequent health checkups.
They change the oil on their car on a regular basis, but they don't go and check the blood pressure and cholesterol on the.
The new data should be a wake-up call for everyone in Lebanon, Moqtad says. High cancer rates leave a heavy burden not only on the population, but on future generations, he says. The government covers some of the medical costs of cancer patients.
This is a model that we cannot sustain in Lebanon financially, treating the patient. We should spend more money on prevention.
Moqtad met with Lebanese government officials this week to present his findings. He told me he hopes that the data will spark fast and more serious action. For The World, I'm Shirin Jafari.
You're listening to The World.
This is The World. I'm Marco Werman.
And I'm Carolyn Beeler. Visiting Antarctica used to be a truly extraordinary trek. The first person to set foot on the continent didn't show up until 1820. By the 1950s, a few hundred explorers were making the journey each year.
Well, as of the 2020s, travel to the seventh continent is booming. Last year alone, more than 120,000 tourists visited Antarctica, a record high. Exciting for travelers, but an added challenge for environmental preservation.
Another tourist season is about to get into full swing. Cruise ships are crossing from the southern tip of South America to the Antarctic Peninsula. Reporter Charlie Shield brings us a look at the tension that business creates between the impulse to explore and the goal of preservation. She filed this story for our partners at Deutsche Welle and their show, Living Planet.
For a long time, the only people venturing to Antarctica were explorers, researchers, and scientists, and the stories they brought back were the closest that ordinary folk could get to this place. But in the past several decades, that has started to change. Increasing numbers of people are travelling to the world's most remote continent as tourists, lured by the prospect of a wild, unique, fast-disappearing experience.
I view it with some concern.
That's Ellie Lean. She's a professor of Antarctic Studies at the University of Tasmania. That's the little island at the bottom of Australia, closer than most to Antarctica. Ellie's written several books about the continent, and she recently co-authored a study about over-tourism in Antarctica. She's talking about concern for the uptick in visitors.
It's not that I think tourism shouldn't exist. I just worry about the skyrocketing numbers. It is increasing exponentially, and at the moment there's nothing to stop it doing so indefinitely.
Antarctica is governed by a coalition of nations that have signed what's called the Antarctic Treaty. So that's 58 nations in total, but only 29 of them have decision-making rights. The peak body that manages tourism there is called the International Association of Antarctic Tour Operators, or IATO for short.
And IATO does a lot of good. It puts in a lot of rules and guidelines for what operators can and can't do.
Visits are highly regulated by IATO, in particular to protect the biosecurity of this continent. Tourists are only permitted to step foot in certain zones of land. They must thoroughly clean their clothing before arriving to prevent the spread of non-native pests, and they must keep at least 5 metres or 15 feet from wildlife at all times, and further away if they're breeding. Cruise ships are also only permitted to use approved, lighter-grade marine fuels because of the Antarctic heavy fuel oil ban.
If you go on a vessel, you'll probably be surprised at just how careful you have to be at what you do. You can't sit on the snow, you can't kneel on the snow, you can't put your backpack on the snow.
These are all important things, Ellie says, but they're still not enough.
There's a lot of discussion about tourism going on at the moment in the meetings, but it's not moving very quickly. So inevitably there's an impact. There's an impact if you go as a scientist, there's an impact if you go as a tourist. Yeah, so you have to justify that to yourself if you can.
On February 25, 2025, Antarctic sea ice reached its minimum extent for the year. And for the 7th year in a row, it was the smallest it's ever been in human history. The continent is melting. That has enormous implications for human life and wildlife far and wide. It effectively functions like a giant mirror for the planet, reflecting the sun's light and heat, which is crucial for maintaining a stable, habitable global climate. As it melts, global sea levels rise. Since 1880, they've already risen by about 8 to 10 inches or 20 to 25 centimetres, threatening low-lying Pacific island nations such as Tuvalu, Fiji, and the Maldives. Scientists say that coastal communities, such as those along the US East Coast and Gulf Coast, which are already suffering from worsening storm surges and high tide flooding, are right in the firing line of sea level rise due to ice melt.
Now to some dire environmental news. Today, NOAA released a report finding that U.S. coastlines will experience a profound sea level rise by 2050. This comes just one day after...
In a kind of perverse way, this melting is actually making it easier to visit Antarctica, increasing accessibility and extending the summer. Of all of these impacts, the emissions driving global warming are the biggest threat to this continent. And yes, those emissions aren't just produced by people travelling to Antarctica each year. They come from all plane travel all over the world, and mostly from burning coal, oil and gas for energy, and everything else that contributes to emissions. That means, as Ellie Lean points out, many of us are guilty, not just the tourists travelling to Antarctica.
I think we're beginning to see that it's a lot more important to our livelihoods than we ever realised. So, Antarctica is going to be the biggest source of sea level rise down the track of anything. And I think we're beginning to realise that, we ignore that at our peril.
This is partly why tourism to Antarctica is often categorised as last chance tourism. That's the idea that you visit a place before it's wrecked or disappears entirely, while it's still intact. This category also includes coral reefs before they're bleached beyond recognition, glaciers before they melt away, and even seeing polar bears in the wild before their habitats disappear.
So there's two different things there, isn't there? I want to see it before climate change changes it irrevocably, and I want to see it before tourism changes it irrevocably. Both of them ironic, because in both cases you are actually adding to the problem by going. For a number of people, it's really a trip of a lifetime. They've saved up a long time to be able to afford it because for some reason or another, they've always been intrigued by Antarctica.
A lot of tourism to Antarctica is curated with a strong educational element, Ellie says. On board many cruises, there are daily lectures on penguins and the continent's unique history and ecology.
I feel like tourism Antarctica's got to be about Antarctica. It can't be tourism done with Antarctica as a glamorous, adventurous backdrop. It's got to be tourism that really does its best to connect people to that place, make them appreciate that place and make them appreciate how endangered it is. And that can only be a finite amount of people every season.
The contradictions inherent in travelling such a vast distance to a vulnerable ecosystem in the name of protecting it.
Charlie Shield with that story from Deutsche Welle's Living Planet. Find it wherever you listen to podcasts.
The World is produced by GBH and PRX, broadcasting weekdays from the Nan and Bill Harris studio in Boston and from the Department of Communication at UC San Diego. I'm Marco Werman.
And I'm Carolyn Beeler. Join us back here tomorrow.
The World is supported by the Carnegie Corporation of New York, working to reduce political polarization through philanthropic support for education, democracy, and peace. More information at carnegie.org. By the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation. Committed to building a more just, verdant, and peaceful world. macfound.org. And by FJC, a foundation of philanthropic funds serving the nonprofit sector with donor-advised funds, fiscal sponsorship, bridge lending, and more. FJC.org. The World's theme music is composed by Ned Porter. The World is a co-production of GBH Boston and PRX. More information at theworld.org.